This is the 2026 Rules Committee that is presenting the revisions of the 26 rules for working equitation in the U.S. Today, it is me, Amy Starr, Glenna Hoekstra, and Marie Maloney. We're doing this for the benefit of all USAWE members and the USAWE Education Committee. All right. The USAWE Rulebook, revision 9.1, issued in February of 2026, is the most current version of the rulebook. And the rulebook undergoes revision each year, and we accept rule change proposals from all members on a form that is on the website, and they must be submitted prior to August 31st. Who's affected by rule changes? Well, it's not just competitors, but it's also show managers, obstacle builders, course designers, our licensed officials, and competitors. When we consider rule change proposals, we consider all of the groups and how rule changes can affect them. And we also adhere to the spirit of the sport and trying to keep our rules in alignment with the World Association for Working Equitation, which we commonly refer to as USAWE. And another important aspect that we try to adhere to is the welfare of our horses. They're very important to us, and we would like to put that forefront in our rules. Oops. This is probably the biggest change in our rule book this year. The level 7 is now USAWE's master rider level. And we have added the young rider level and the junior riders level. All three of these international levels will ride under the USAWE regulations. These USAWE regulations are in Appendix H in our rulebook. And on the first page of Appendix H, there is a short list of exceptions to the rules so that our licensed shows can offer these levels in their rules. These new levels, the young riders are for riders 16 to 21 years old, and junior riders are up to 18 years old. Yes, there is some overlap here. At the international level, they have separate teams for juniors and young riders, and a junior may ride on a young riders team, but once they compete young riders, they can no longer compete juniors. Youth riders, being young riders or junior riders, may also earn awards in levels 5 and 6, respectively. This was a benefit that we really want to encourage our young riders and junior riders to be able to compete in all shows, so that if a show isn't able to offer the USAWE, the international level, but they can offer 5 and 6, we want to encourage our young riders to be doing that. There is also a reference comparing the USAWE rules and the USAWE rules that will be available soon on our website. Now I will turn it over to Marie.
Thank you, Amy. So there's always a little bit of confusion on how many times a horse can be ridden and on what levels. And again, we always want to make sure that we are taking the welfare of the horse into consideration. So in areas where you have school horses that are being used by multiple horses, we want to make sure that we give as many riders the opportunity to show that we can without putting any undue stress on the horse. So remember, the main rule is that a horse is always limited to 6 rides in a day. So if you have 2 youth riders riding level 2 and doing all 3 levels, then only 2 times can that horse be ridden. If you have 3 riders only riding level 1, therefore not doing the speed trial, then that horse could, in theory, be ridden in with 3 different riders. So that's one piece. So keep that in mind. Bottom rule, 6 rides for 1 horse in a day. We also went ahead and made a couple of changes on how a horse and rider pair can move up or down. And we wanted to make it a little bit easier, both if they're struggling or if there's been an injury or a training setback, either for the horse or the rider. Like for me, I'm going to be having hip surgery this year. I very well may move down a level because of that. So again, we want to make sure that we take care of both our horses and the riders so they can move down one level. Now, this is going to be a little bit on the honor system. It's not something that, the LOs are going to be tracking, but we trust our riders. We want you to do the right thing for you and your horse. And if you need to move down, then we're allowing that. You may only earn the award for that year at the highest level that the rider horse pair is competing at. And again, the exception is the young riders and the junior riders that Amy just referenced in the prior slide. Okay, tech and attire. This was a really fun one to discuss, and there was a lot of discussion. Just a little bit of history. Originally, the presentation score was part of the rider score, and it was not a freestanding score in the collected marks. A while ago, it was determined at one of the regional competitions, we had the USAWE judge in, and there was a lot of just feelings that as an organization, we were not taking ourselves seriously and presenting ourselves in the most professional manner. We don't want the riders just to get up in the morning, slap a saddle on, and go show. We want them to be proud of themselves. We want them to represent the sport well. And so we felt like we needed to add in a presentation score saying, let's up the ante a little bit, everybody. So I think that was a really good thing. And I think it served the purpose. I think across the country, everybody said, you know what, we can be better. And they really stood up and took the time to both present their horse and themselves in a much professional manner. The difficulty is that that's a really hard thing to judge. And the judges spent a lot of time trying to get very cohesive in our judging marks, but it's just hard. A lot of that is just fairly subjective. And even though we tried really hard, there was always a lot of discord, and the writers were always comparing, well, this was my score. Why did you get that score? And I think it was just creating more angst than we were moving forward. So the rules committee made the decision this year to take a separate presentation score out and put it back into the rider score. So don't think that it's not still there, because it is. And on your dressage score sheet, on all your score sheets, it's going to say that presentation is right into your rider score. So don't stop doing what you're doing. Keep presenting yourself and your horse in the best manner possible. Braid that or clean your tail, make sure your horse is clean, shine your boots, all of those things. All right, so that's the presentation piece. I know there's still going to be a lot of talk about it. There are people who are really happy that it's gone. There are people who are not going to be happy that it's gone. But I think it was time to make that change. Okay, onward. The leverage bits must have a curb strap or a chain. This next one is also one that has created a little bit of controversy. We did make the decision to allow bell boots in all trials. Now, there are those who don't think that that was maybe the right thing to do. The rules committee felt like it was in the welfare of the horse. And as an organization, I think we always have to keep that in mind. So, yes, we do a dressage test, but we are not training dressage horses. Our horses are working field horses. And I think bell boots are just one thing that we can do to protect the horse across all trials. Again, for people who don't agree with that, you always have recourse, and that is making a rule proposal change for 2027. So it will be, we'll just see how many people like it and how many people don't like it. Another change is we are now requiring competition numbers for all shows. You must wear your number when you're showing, but also anytime your horse is out of the stall, it needs to be on your halter. It's a safety piece that we need to make sure that your number is always on the horse and that anybody can tell what that horse is if they're on the competition ground. All right, here's one more. This is a big slide, you guys. There was a lot of changes, but I think these are all positive and I think they're all good. The attire for course walk. And again, one of those things that there was a lot of differences. I happen to live in Kansas and I did a show in July and it was 103 degrees. It was miserable. And I'm out there doing 2 course walks in my tall boots with my jacket on, with my hard hat on, and I was miserable. And we just decided that that's probably not really the most appropriate thing. So we're taking away that you have to be completely dressed in your show attire. Now, that doesn't mean come in your tank top and your flip-flops and not look professional. Wear suitable shoes that are comfortable to walk, but still be professional and appropriate. Now, if it's a regional championship, we are going back to that you must be dressed in your legal attire for the show. So again, I think these are all positive changes. I think they're good for the horse and good for the riders.
Thank you, Marie. All right. Linna's going to come on and talk about changes in cattle.
Thank you, Amy. Well, there are a couple of exciting changes in the cattle trial. The first is that we will now allow the cattle trial to be held out of order at a licensed competition. So for the show managers out there who know the difficulties sometimes of securing cattle, caring for those cattle and feeding them for an entire weekend, this should offer a little relief. And our hope is that it will allow more show managers to offer the cattle trial, since that is the heart of our sport. Now, at championship competitions, the cattle trial must still be the 4th trial. It cannot be held out of order at a championship show. We also have just changed the name or clarified what we mean by the experienced cattle handler. This means that if a show manager has someone who is quite experienced in working cattle, they can choose to have that person in the arena as a member of each team. They will act as a member equally on each of those teams and offer their expertise, not as a trainer, not anything like that, but as a helper, as a team member. So we can, that's always been in there, but we just clarified turnback rider because that kind of was a connotation of a different discipline. Another thing is if the cattle are patterned or worked before the cattle trial, which is always a good idea, we are allowing that competitors may assist. However, all competitors must be given the opportunity to do so. So if you're a show manager and you want to get your cattle worked ahead of time, You can offer that to your competitors, potentially for a fee to help offset the cost of said cattle and get everyone in there with an opportunity to see the cattle and get familiar with them prior to the actual trial. Team members will be assigned by show management, and show managers are encouraged, if they can, to set up the teams with similar skill sets. So in other words, I know at the recent show where I assigned them, I didn't put level 2 youth in with a level 7 master's rider because it's just two different ways of working cattle. Level 2, you're learning. Level 7, you're there and you're making it happen. So team members are assigned by hopefully skill set, and show managers are encouraged to really take that into consideration when they assign those teams. Another thing we clarified, this is kind of common sense, but once you have penned your cow, you are responsible to return that cow back to the herd quietly. In other words, don't run it back to the herd. That patterns them poorly, teaches them bad manners. So you and your teammates are encouraged to let and quietly return it to the herd before the next team member starts their run. Next slide. Another area of change this year were a few minor modifications to the obstacles in Exhibit B. Jump rails are now allowed to be between 8 feet and 12 feet, and side pass rails are allowed to be 10 feet to 12 feet. We did that because we know it can be difficult to secure 12-foot poles for a lot of us, myself included, unless I can find someone who's liquidating from a show barn or a jumping barn. Those are very hard to come by in my area. Slalom poles can be 5 feet to 6.5 feet tall, or they can be plants, but they must be at least 2 feet high. That's a good thing for the horse to be able to see them. This is an important one. The distance between the slalom poles has been increased to 7 meters. This should help our riders in the fundamental levels to navigate those slaloms a little bit more, I don't want to say easily, but a little bit easier as you're going up the levels. So that's a big one for show managers and for course designers. As you're designing your course, make sure that added limit or added lineal feet will fit into your arena. So just because you've had the slaloms in your arena before, double check your course this time. Pens may not have live animals. That is something that we decided for the welfare of all would be best. And the pen shall be constructed in a manner that it can fall down if it's hit. Now that would be, no hard barriers, nothing that could, if you snagged a stirrup on it, it wouldn't drag it with you, that sort of thing. So pens just need to be safe. We need to have them, if the horse spooks while in the pen, we need them to be able to get out of it without any major catastrophes. The bell corridor may have a bell on each side of the corridor rather than one that is in the center. And this is for, you could have a right and a left bell that are perhaps reaching out 6 or 8 inches into the corridor, but not all the way in the middle. And this would allow the rider in an error situation to exit the corridor if that were an issue. The recommended height for the gate has increased to 5 feet. Now, 4 foot 3 inches is still the minimum. But for those of you who ride very tall horses, I know that 4 foot 3 inches is darn near impossible to do, and try to stay in some manner of balance. So 5 feet is our recommended height. The bank, if you have a bank, if it's going both directions, it must have at least 12 feet between the two directions. More is better. We need the horse to be able to balance themselves before going up or down the other side. And if the bank is a ramp up or down, the ramp must be at least 8 feet long for a gradual incline. We don't need a big jump off there. So those are the major changes. Again, I encourage everyone to read the entire rule book, look for the changes, but we're highlighting sort of the major things that changed this year. Performance of the obstacles. Level 1 riders should trot over the jump. You can walk it, but it is a lower score. So practice that trotting over the jump and you'll get a higher score. You also will no longer be penalized for 1 to 2 strides of canter after the jump. This was set up so some horses like to canter after the jump. And we would rather that we allow that canter and then bring them back to trot rather than trying to kind of, hold them back or bring them back harshly to a walk or to a trot because we don't want to get penalized. So 1 to 2 strides of canter are allowed now at level 1. Now, during the speed trial, a horse must touch the bridge with at least 1 hoof. Believe it or not, there are horses that can jump that entire bridge. That is not performing the obstacle, that is jumping. So the horse must touch the bridge with at least 1 hoof, or they must go around and do it again, or it's a disqualification. For navigation on levels 1 through 3, horses should be using the correct bend or canter lead for the arc of travel between obstacles. For levels 4 to 6, that is typically the case as well, but at some times it may be appropriate to use a counter canter for a correct technical approach. Again, for levels 4 through 6 only, but that would be your navigation score and would be something that the judge will judge according to what they're seeing.
Okay, so this is a chart that the Rules Committee put together. If I can say this and not have it sound ridiculous, trying to make things a little simpler. So I know that's hard. And this is, I think, one of the hardest things that as competitors we struggle with when you're in the middle of a course is when do I have to go back and redo an entire obstacle? When can I just do the obstacle from where I messed up? Which obstacles have to be? When is a loop okay? When is an extra loop not okay? So this chart is hopefully going to make all of that easier, and that this is going to be a quick reference for you. Now, I know when you're in the middle of the course, your brain is going to be going, oh, now which box was that in? But hopefully this is going to make things easier for all of us to remember. So the first couple ones are pretty straightforward. If the obstacle is knocked down, the rider must dismount and reset. And those are all pretty straightforward. If you can't fix the obstacle, you have to get off and reset it. So the second one is the obstacles that, if dropped, must be picked up. And remember, the L1 riders are always going to get assistance from our ground crew. So that's going to be the cup, the jump, the rope gate, and the garrocha. The third one, to me, is the one that's always the easiest to remember, which is that the obstacles, if done incorrectly, must be redone from the beginning. So like the bridge, if you step off the bridge, you have to go back through your start markers and redo the entire bridge. Same thing with the pin. Those two are pretty absolute. All right, so the obstacles that may be corrected without starting from the beginning and may be restarted are the pickup pole, the deposit pole, the rounding post, the single and double, and the cup. So those you can start. All right, so the omission or incomplete execution. So these are the ones that you must correct or you will get a DQ, or if you're L1, that -5. So you must go both directions on the figure 8. You have to do the correct loops on your drum, the double, the single. You have to make those loops all correct or you will get that DQ. All right, the next one is one that we had some discussion about last year because there were riders that were adding a loop like in the drums and they were being DQ'd. So if I'm riding and I'm trying to do a flying change and I don't have enough balance to flip that change between the barrels and I opt to make another loop, to set myself up for the change. That is not going to be a DQ, but it will be a lower score because you needed to make that extra loop. Okay. And then the final one is the obstacles that, if knocked over, is a lower score or a time penalty if we're in the speed trial, and those don't have to be reset. If I drop the jump, if I hit the side pass pole, those things do not have to be reset. So there's a lot on this chart. It's one I think we're all going to have to spend a little bit of time with and really get those boxes all solidified in our brains. So I hope it makes sense. I hope this is helpful. The exceptions are going to be if the garrocha does not remain in the barrel in the replace portion, or if the barrel is knocked over, only that element has to be corrected regardless of the rest of the line. Remember that touching an obstacle with the wrong hand is always going to be a DQ that cannot be corrected. And again, we say this all the time, except for L1, which is a 5-point penalty.
Thank you, Marie. Here are some changes that are directed more toward judges and technical delegates. S and R judges are the ones that are eligible to judge levels 6, masters, young riders, and juniors, the international levels. So the S and the large R judges need to become familiar with the USAWE rules. Judges must judge through the end of the ride, and if there is a DQ, the bell will be rung to signal the DQ at the end of the ride before the rider leaves the arena. But the bell will not be rung and they won't be called off course. The DQ bell will ring at the end. This next one, persons may not serve as licensed officials and competitors at licensed competitions. If there are 2 different license shows in a weekend, a person may be a competitor prior to acting as a licensed official. And if you are acting as a licensed official, that includes scribing, shadowing, or silent judging. And this is about reducing conflict of interest. So if you need to do both in a weekend, be sure that you are a competitor first and acting as a licensed official second. If the show mixes up the schedule and has parts of both shows on the first day, that does not work for being able to do both roles, because we cannot have licensed officials at the judges' table if they are also being competitors. And then the final bullet here, the course designer must be a USAWE member. And these rules are about to ensure that all of our courses are thoroughly verified and reduce the occurrence of courses not meeting our rules. A course must always be approved by the presiding judge, and the course may be designed by a separate course designer or the judge or a technical delegate, but it must be thoroughly reviewed. So those are the changes for judges and TDs specifically. Now, if you have questions, everyone is welcome to email the Rules Committee at the designated Rules Committee email address. We have a 6-member committee, and one of our members will respond very promptly if you send those questions into the Rules Committee. Thank you very much, and that concludes our presentation.